In a world where information seems to travel at the speed of light and traffic at a snail's pace, where the agenda of those at the helm doesn't always reflect the pressures on the streets, where the rubber hits the road, where there's queue of issues needing to be interrogated in the name of speaking truth to power.
Welcome to a place at the table,
where we set the agenda,
table the issues that matter to you,
and invite you to take a seat at the table.
Hello and welcome to a place at the table. If I sound upbeat today, it's because I've come to celebrate. Yes, celebrate, you heard me.
Celebrate, Funke, as an Owambe.
Yes.
I hope you haven't fallen victim to the mirage of wealth I'll be speaking of.
Well, let's see.
Zumah, have you turned accountant to my stead?
Yes, I'm an accountant.
I'm still doing some accounting of my own, actually. And I'll be holding us accountable to our votes. Welcome to the table today.
Thank you very much, Yinka. It feels like we already have quite a bit in common. Since value and accountability go hand in hand, I'll be speaking on harnessing our nation's true resource today.
I'll be directing the satellite to our conscience, since it's a time for reawakening.
Indeed, a reawakening, a revival, or even a renaissance. We're certainly kicking off with a clean slate at the table today. My piece today is celebratory. Here is why. Here at the table in the recent past, I'd interrogated the welfare of journalists. In exploring the relationship between Nigerian media and politics, I challenged the accusation of media capture bandied by some activists. I celebrated the fearlessness of journalists, even in the military era, and I decried the continual arrests of journalists by the state. In the Nigerian media and climate of political reporting, I decried the state of the Nigerian media, unloved by the government, despised by the people, and hated by the police. I asked everyone to pause to reappraise the role of the media. And I said famously, if you still need us, then stop the attacks. Now, the Nigerian LNG did a thing for journalism last week. It held an appreciation event to celebrate journalists who had been covering the Nigerian prizes for literature, sciences, and literary criticism. As to compare, I was right at the center of the story. A totally unexpected gesture. 5 journalists were rewarded for being voices of impacts for 20 years. There was no call for entries. The judges, journalists with integrity, led by Taiwo Obe, Kadri Ahmed, and Chido Wakama, combed the internet for materials, stories, special reports, features about the prizes in the past 2 decades and came up with the overall winner, the journalists who didn't regurgitate the press releases, who wrote in an engaging manner, whose work could be found, curated consistently online. And the award categories? The most consistent, the most versatile, the most punctual, and the most engaging were created around values that are considered a cake, irrelevant, and fast disappearing. The fireside chat was a conversation about post-published status of journalistic content. It was a critical and needful discussion with former Senior Special Assistant New Media to President Muhammadu Buhari, Tolu Ogunlesi, and Editor Business Day, Tayo Fagbule, as panelists. The bottom line is our body of work should be archived by leveraging technology and money made from it through paywall. The news is others can aggregate your work if you don't. Imagine if every Nigerian brand added value to journalists and journalism this way.
Thank you for always advocating for a better media and journalism in Nigeria. I know it's been a long-standing advocacy for you.
Yes.
Also, I have no idea that you compare events. That's nice to know.
Oh, I do.
Yeah. I like how independent the process is. The fact that there was no call to entry, there was no call to vote, because most of the time, when things like this happen, it's usually a popularity contest.
Right.
So now it's just independent audit of previous works and archives. I like the fact that we are moving away from celebrating noise and moving towards celebrating value. Other brands should emulate NLNG and seek to do more in celebrating the right things, that makes our community better.
I see journalism as a tool for social engineering. You know, and the reason why I say that is, and that is seriously missing in today's realm, where you find journalists just writing or repeating what people have sent, things that they think is newsworthy. No. It should be about making changes. You can see that most global changes in the world started with journalists, whether it be the French Revolution, end to torture, end to slavery. Journalists were at the center of society, transforming society. So for me, topical issues like this issue of fuel subsidy and the halubalu between NNPC and Dangote, these are what journalists should focus on enlightening. As of today, one cannot say specifically why Dangote is pegging fuel price at 1,200 to 1,300 in a product that is produced in Ibejuleki here. And journalists have not even gone to see the agreement. Are you telling me that the whole of Nigeria, there's no journalist that can go to go and
we're not sure.
request for the agreement? No, the agreement between NNPC and Dangote, where is the agreement? So ours now is a nation where we have a lot of laid-back journalists who are just waiting for press releases to make headlines, or who are waiting for something to break. Journalists should be the news breakers.
It's unfortunate that the level of journalism that we have now is an apology. Like Deji said, it's almost as if they are in one WhatsApp group.
Oh, there is a WhatsApp group.
There is a WhatsApp group. Sweet
Okay.
Jesus. So it's the same WhatsApp group, and somebody just throws in the information, maybe it's a press release or something like that, and all of them
Copy and paste.
just copy and paste and publish the same thing.
Which is why
There's
these
no
five
nuance.
ones were outstanding. You remember I said they were not regurgitating press releases, because truly, as you said, that's what a lot of journalists have been doing.
Yeah, you know, so that's why I really commend NLNG for this, and I'll also ask that other organizations, they also, you know, mirror the same approach. We must reward competence. The reality today is that we're not rewarding competence, we're rewarding incompetence. You know,
And noise,
and
yes.
today, journalists, mainstream journalists, are trying to become skit writers,
Content creators.
content creators,
And
instead of
clickbaiters.
really doing the right thing.
As I add on to what Yinka said, we are in an attention deficit economy now. So many things are struggling for attention. So journalism should also reflect that. It needs to change with time. So if you're putting out content that are a bit analytical, you need to put it out in a format that is digestible to the everyday people. The quality of education over the years has declined. The quality of attention, the amount of time we can dedicate. But now it's a struggle. We only want information in digestible format. So maybe someone should do a thread, an analytical thread on important issues to the economy, not just for the younger people, but also to the people at the grassroots. I feel like the people at the grassroots, they are significantly marginalized in information dissemination. A lot of media houses, they are focused on new media, forgetting that a lot of Nigerians are still cut off from the internet. The radios are there. They are underutilized. A lot of them are struggling to stay afloat. The local TV stations are also there, very much underutilized. We need to do more in that space and ensure that information get across to everybody.
Yeah, I would just like to corroborate what Yinka said about how do you really build the moral compass of any society, right? By what's your word? And I mean, kudos to NLNG for spotlighting, you know, those journalists that have done incredible work, that have done the hard things over the years. And, you know, because in some way, to a degree, a lot of like journalism on social media, on new media, has been democratized. Anyone can just pick up a phone and share whatever, and a lot has been lost. You know, a lot of true fact has been lost in that process, right? So I think maybe it makes a lot of sense for us to be able to distill information at storytelling level for people. When we're reporting news or trying to help Nigerians understand what is going on in the country. A lot of it is still weaved in complexity. So the common man really has no idea. So everyone just runs with the one-liners. right? And that is why people look to the skit makers for information, because they've been able to distill some of these things effectively through storytelling. And it's like when you're reporting data, it almost has no soul to it, but storytelling is like data, but with soul. I think a lot of that has been lost in journalism, right? And I think if we look towards rewarding more of that, then we'd have more excellence in that regard. So, yeah.
That's right. Thank you very much today. You know, as the compare, while I was talking, I said to them, storytelling is art and art is power. So you're spot on with your take on storytelling. Our stars are in our midst and we have only to give them the platform to shine. You were right.
I'm glad you're speaking of authentic stars and not the shine that seems to have blinded us from seeing things as they really are. Did you know that 4 out of every 10 Nigerians are estimated to live below the international poverty line by the end of 2024? Did you know that Nigeria's GDP per capita at about $1,100 is significantly lower than other nations like Cote d'Ivoire at $2,700, Ghana at $2,200, and Zimbabwe? Yes, the Zimbabwe will laugh about at $2,000. Did you know that Nigeria tax to GDP ratio stands at 10.9% compared to Ghana at 14.1% and Kenya at 15.2%? What this means in simple English is that the amount of taxable economic activities in Nigeria is significantly low. Did you know that Nigeria's budget is $38.3 billion for 200 million people, while Algeria's is $98 billion for less than 50 million people? But we are quick to shout, giant of Africa, quick to scream, Nigeria is a rich country. But where is the wealth? Let's talk about the oil, our supposed black gold. Yes, we are one of the largest oil-producing nations in Africa, but we produce about 1.9 million barrels per day, while Saudi produces about 9 million barrels per day, with just about 35 million people to cater to. For a country of over 200 million people, our oil wealth, when divided, becomes barely a trickle. Can you see how much of a fallacy our richness is, or will we continue to wallow in the denial? We have been conditioned to equate wealth with ostentation and loud display, measuring wealth in resources and not in our quality of life. We are rich in culture, resilience, and potential, but tragically poor economically, in governance and in resource allocation. We've let this narrative of being rich mask the poverty of opportunity, the poverty of justice, and the poverty of accountability. So when you hear someone say Nigeria is rich, ask them, rich for whom? Because while a small percentage revels in unimaginable luxury, the masses are left with crumbs, dreaming of a day when they too can taste this mythical wealth.
The challenge we have is the population.
That's why we are broke.
The challenge we have is the population, because Nigeria is, in terms of the size of the GDP, well, sometimes it flips, but we're either the first or the second biggest economy in Africa. That's a fact, in terms of the size of our GDP.
Yeah.
However, when you divide that by the massive number of population we have, you begin to see why we are, or they have more capacity than other African nations. The answer is yes. So when you're looking at us from that perspective, you say, oh, Nigeria has resources, Nigeria has whatever. But when you look at the distribution of that resources, it comes down to the fact that it cannot benefit the average Nigerian. And the problem is the population.
Not enough to go around.
The other issue here is also the issue of the tax to GDP. You mentioned tax to GDP. And you rightly said that it is 11%, although I'm sure the guys in the Ministry of Finance will disagree. They'll tell you somewhere around 16%. But I agree with you that it's really around this figure. And we know that the recommendation of the World Bank is that it must be at least 15%. Now, how do you solve that? You solve that by raising more taxes, all right? You can either increase existing taxes, or
capture more people.
You kind of capture more people into the bracket, and you can argue, rightly or wrongly, that the government is trying to fix that. Now, the other issue also that I pointed out in your advocacy has to do with the budget. Yes, Nigeria's budget, somewhere, if we had the supplementary budget, it's somewhere around the 30-something trillion naira, which comes down to the 38 billion that you talked about. But that's the federal government budget. Okay. So it's one thing that, because I hear this a lot when people make those kind of comparisons, because you must understand that Nigeria is a federation.
Federal, yeah.
And that federation has both the federal and the state. So when you combine the budgets of the state, it somehow ends up somewhere around that 55 billion. It's still not good enough in reality, because that amount is lower than what New York, not even New York, I think even just the fire department in New York spends. So we really have to look at ourselves and ask ourselves that how can we extract value out of this country, out of every economic activity. And one way to look at that is you can either look at it from the point of what is the level of productivity everybody contributes into the economy.
Well, spot on, Zumah. I love this advocacy. It's the comparison with other nations for me when you started talking about Cote d'Ivoire and Angola and the rest of them. 4 out of 10 Nigerians going to international poverty level at the end of 2024 is source for concern. Before he started talking, I was wondering what Algeria and Angola is looking like if we are like this, because they're oil-producing nations. Oil wealth, when divided, becomes a trickle. A quote taken out of your monologue. And it made me wonder how Nigeria could have been truly wealthy if we had factored in solid minerals. I mean, I like that the president is talking about the blue something ministry. And it's good because we're harnessing what we have in that wise. But what about solid minerals? And the hub in Nigeria is Nasarawa State, has rich deposit of solid minerals in different shades and hues. But by now, Nasarawa should be like the star that Niger Delta is, but we're not looking in that direction. Why? Because, as you said in your monologue, we think oil, and we think this oil is making us the biggest and the giant and all of that. But with your analysis, we see that it is a mirage. It is a mirage, and we need to start looking inwards and start looking at the other options that we have, the other alternatives.
I mean, what is clear is there's a gap, right? There's a very huge gap between the people that have the wealth, which is accrued at the very top, and the people that have been completely removed, from and do not have access to that wealth. And I think that is that may be the most meaningful way to measure wealth in this country. And the West likes to say, it's just the thing about living below the poverty line, $2 daily. But I don't really think that is what poverty in its true sense is, in our country. It's that people have been completely removed from systems, even at the very fundamental level, education. And we like to brag that we have this huge population. I was in New York recently, and there was a panel conversation I was in, and there was a lot of data numbers. Nigeria would have the youngest population in the world in the next 50 years. All of this is true. But what we're going to have is we're going to have a huge population of people who cannot contribute anything of value to a world that is constantly evolving, right? So if we have that, that is not an asset, that would be a liability. Right. I would continue to even put more pressure on our resource, right? So Nigeria is a wealthy country if you can really look inwards and harness the potential that its people has. And this could be our single greatest hack. Yes, crude oil, we have crude oil, but the world is changing. And, emerging technologies, less usage of fossil fuels, and that would change. Imagine a world where Nigeria's crude oil has no use for the global market. What are we going to do then? Then we have to look at our people, at our talent. And if we can really find a way to harness that, then we can truly build, remarkable wealth. I think that is where, the solution lies. But other than that, it's all just a mirage, like you rightly said.
Yes, so basically Nigeria is by my own standard, Nigeria is one of the poorest countries in the world. Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world, where the leaders do absolutely nothing but steal, loot, destroy, waste resources, leaders who produce nothing, take everything from the nation, ride in sirens and convoys that are completely unnecessary, that add 0 naira to the GDP of our country. Leaders who act and behave like buccaneers. Look at, why do you need a president with 100 car convoy, what poverty capital of the world? The president buys a brand new jet, takes it to China to go and borrow money. Nobody is going to bring their hard-earned money, billions of dollars, and invest in an economy where even the stability indices of your economy does not work. Okay, what is the rationale behind increasing electricity tariffs and the discriminatory billing that Nigerians are currently witnessing? And you want this nation to be a prosperous one. A nation that is battling with inflation, what is the rationale behind putting excessive import taxes when you do not produce locally within your borders? What is the rationale behind ensuring that you stifle businesses and kill businesses? I can tell you, you can fact check me, whether on any topic I say. Before I comment on anything, I have done my extensive research. Businesses are dying in the last 9 years. Businesses are dying more than ever before. The possibility of a new business surviving in Nigeria is almost less than 1%. Possibility of a new business surviving. So how do you quantify a nation? You quantify a nation, whether a nation is rich or poor, by how the citizens perform, how the businesses in the nation perform. We are performing so poorly and so badly. Ours is a nation where we borrow to pay debt. It doesn't make sense. We borrow to fund the budget. Then we borrow to fund the expensive lifestyle of politicians. And you see people, I just came into Lagos. At the airport, there are more private jets than commercial planes.
It is terrible. So the citizens can't afford to travel by air. But you find more people owning jets. What does that mean? It means that the wealth of the nation is skewed in a particular direction. And the middle class is being wiped out.
Non-existent. A nation is only as wealthy as its poor, only as strong as its weakest. The sooner we diagnose our problem, the better.
Certainly, Zumah, while we're at it, isn't it time we consider early voting? Since 2007, voter turnout in Nigeria has been on a steady decline. From 69% in 2007, it declined to 26.72% in 2023. Out of a total of 93 million registered voters, only 24.9 million voted in 2023. This means that more than 68 million people stayed home. When you compare voter turnout to the population, the picture is even worse. Only 10% of our population voted in 2023 as compared to 48% and 43% respectively in the last US and UK elections. Why is this the case, you may ask? Some would say it's evidence of voter apathy because of disenfranchisement and violence. Others will counter by insisting that it's actually evidence that our elections are getting even more secure. And with cases of vote padding experienced during the 1999 to 2007 elections reducing with every elections. Whichever side of the argument you are, one fact is clear. Less and less Nigerians are voting. The onus is on us to improve access to voting and make it easier for Nigerians to vote. There are plenty of options available, from increasing number of polling units to increase transparency of the voting process, just to boost trust, and also diaspora voting. Today, I want to focus on one option, early voting. In the US, early voting has been in place since the 1840s, primarily for military officers. But in recent times, it has increased and become more commonplace, such that 47 states now offer some form of early voting. In 2020, a whopping 65% of the total votes came in early, as against 42% in the 2016 elections. Surely you will say that that was because of COVID, but experts are expecting the early voting numbers this year to still exceed the 50%. if we want to improve the voter turnout in Nigeria, we need to start rethinking the idea of voting day to voting month. Surely, we have to work out the modalities and amend the relevant laws, maybe even the Constitution. But if we think through it, we can actually make it work. It is an anomaly for only 10% of the population of a big country like Nigeria to vote in the leaders of that nation. I believe early voting will surely improve turnout.
I agree with you, Yinka, on early voting increasing turnout, but then do we have the resources to make that happen?
I don't think so.
Your advocacy
I think we can think about it.
It is grand in theory, but in practice,
yes.
because
at least put it out there.
Even the current one they voted, we currently on. It's like we do it with powers and principalities. It's a struggle to even get it done the right way. Outside that, when we talk about only about 10% of our population voted, as opposed to 47% and whatnot in other countries, I would like to point out that Nigerian adult population. So I think we should compare that to the Nigerian adult population. We have a population of about 104 under 18 in Nigeria. So in reality, the adult population, worst case, is about 100 million. So if you're having 24%, 24 million, it's about 25%, which is still low, but it's not as terrible as it sounds like. Going back to 2023 election, and the low turnout, despite the high registration, it is concerning. And I'm sure we've had a conversation about it earlier at the table, like as much as we try to say there is voters' apathy, we cannot afford to be apathetic. Your civil responsibility as a citizen is for you to vote and to be voted for. We should always endeavor to exercise our civil rights as at when due. Say, oh, our votes do not count. Your votes count. If your votes do not count, the politicians will not be trying to buy it. If your votes do not count, there wouldn't be violence at the polling units. So if people are trying to scare you and say, oh, don't come out and vote, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, it's not because your votes do not count, it's because your votes count and they don't want you to come out to ensure that it counts or to even partake in it. That's it for me.
You know, at the risk of sounding like Deji the other time, I just said that, you know, sometimes I think we should just boycott these elections because it's making no sense.
We can afford to.
You come out, yeah, I already put a clause on this because it's making no sense. You tell me it's time to vote, go and vote, I go to vote, I'm chased back home, or I go to vote and we know that we voted for this person and it doesn't count at the end of the day. I mean, where did APP come out from in the Rivers State elections such that they swept everywhere? You know, and then, you know, there are lots of intrigues in the Nigerian political system. I'm not saying they don't exist.
But don't you think that the idea of early voting can actually mitigate that?
Mitigate what? In Nigeria, I was coming to that.
Okay, fine. It's idealistic. I agree. You know, but the idea here is that there's an impediment to voting. People don't want to go to the polling vote because they are scared of violence or because they think that it won't count.
This early voting,
but if we are able to crack this or hack this, as Tunde will say, if we're able to hack this, that people can actually mail in their vote or have to go in person at any point in time within a month to actually vote. You know, so the idea that, okay...
we want to give us this current system.
Just think about the possibility, Funke.
I love the possibility.
How we can negate this idea that, okay, it's just only, you know...
Just one day we all have to go out.
People can actually vote, and then we can actually be...
Snap out of it!
This is Nigeria. Let's not even go to the beavers and all of that. You want early voting by who? So somebody will now be in charge of all those votes that we send in early by mail.
Yes. The issue here is that we are focused on the problem.
Okay.
Right? Why can this happen?
Okay, who will be the custodians?
What about we start to think about, hang on, we can actually do this if we set some parameters in place, if we put some systems in place.
I think along with you.
Yeah, it's possible.
Would this be handled by the Nigerian Post Office? I
we can stop.
No,
And then your votes will get missing.
Maybe it can be
You see, let me play the devil's advocate again. I'm sorry to play the devil's advocate once again. Very simple. Ours is a nation where there are too many hungry people. You know, all a poor man thinks about is food and his stomach. He doesn't think about integrity. He doesn't think about not compromising. He doesn't think about... This is a nation where election was going on. INEC switched off his own portal because the incumbent candidate was losing in this same nation. This is a nation where we are even toying with the idea of early voting or electronic voting. That said, on the other hand, you see, there are some people that were saying that, oh, if Tinubu does not perform, we'll vote him out. Is this Tinubu you vote out? This one. Then there are some people that were saying last year, about over a year ago, that the government will favor me and my family. They are no longer saying that. Furthermore, and very ironic as well, is this whole idea of, you know, elections are won by ideology or by the better candidate or by this. That's not what wins elections here. And you need to understand the peculiarity, of the US, you know, UK and these other climes and what is obtainable here. In this country, just this last election, people were entering churches to campaign in the election. People were sharing money to campaign. Somebody filled a Muslim ticket and he won in this same country. So the determining factors are issue-based, ideology, you know, inclinations, the desire to do better. Those are not what determines elections here. If, assuming without considering that we allow early voting here, I can assure you that T-Pain will vote now. He will vote now in anticipation of 2027.
Here's a thought. And first of all, I appreciate the cynicism, because if we're not able to do something with integrity in one day, why do we think giving an entire month would fix that? I think it would only make it worse. You've now given people a lot of time to manipulate results. So the real issue here is trust. I remember a conversation I had with my landlady in the apartment where I used to live, and she was talking about election during the time of, I think, Shagari, and how everybody came out. I think a lot of the reason why there's so much apathy towards the electoral process now is people do not trust the outcomes. Yeah. And that is the real issue here. Even if you give us an entire year to vote, that is the problem. There's no trust in the system. There's no trust in INEC. There's no trust that if I go there and I vote for this person, that it will count, right? A much bigger problem, and this was a problem for me as well. I voted in the last election, but the one before that, I did not vote because getting my PVC was almost impossible. I queued for 2 days, I still didn't get it. And I just left it alone. And this is the reality for a lot of people because we've created such a convoluted process for people to just get their voter's card. That in itself has excluded a lot of people, a large percentage of people. We need to fix those systems, right? If there's ease of access to, there are a lot of more complex problems, but at least let people have their cards. It should be a very simple thing that they can vote with it.
But outside that, I think a huge part of why the younger people don't participate in elections is because there is a disconnect to them with, they don't understand how elections affect their lives, how the choice of leaders determines the kinds of decisions that would affect their future. They just don't understand it. So all one needs to be done in the space of advocacy to educate and enlighten them on how election works and the impact on their everyday life.
Fantastic. I'd like to just leave it there. Thank you, Zumah, for helping me wrap up of this. Otherwise, Deji will have had me for lunch. When facing a repeatedly confounding problem, it makes sense to just think outside the box.
I think we had quite a bit in common, thinking outside the box. So as a chess player, that's my natural appetite. Harnessing Nigeria's most valuable resource. If I asked you what Nigeria's most valuable resource is, what would be your answer? You know, recently I was watching an interview that the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, gave, and he said the world still thinks of China as a place people go to obtain low-grade products. But this is no longer the case. And I think people also think going to China is so you can get cheap labor, and that has changed over time. Apple still goes to China because there's a specific kind of tooling, engineering that they need to make the iPhones at that quality. Now, he said this, he said in the US, you can maybe fill a room like this with the engineers that have that specific skill to build the iPhone. But if you go to China, you can fill multiple stadiums with it. Now, what has China done differently? It has designed the educational curriculum in such a way that it equips the next generation to become a desirable workforce for the global markets. It has designed its curriculum at vocational level. This is why you see 5-year-old kids in China, they're already doing high-level vocational activities. Now, China understands that the most valuable resource isn't the oil that they have or the mineral resource that they have, but their people. And the world will come for them for that talent. Now, we need to rethink our archaic educational curriculum and systems in Nigeria. And, you know, for the work that I do, I like to think of chess as a means to an end, not the end in itself. Right, as a medium that goes towards like the intellectual development, you know, building capacity for young people, a lot of that abstract thinking, problem solving skills that can be adapted across board. Chess is an avenue for developing the intellectual capacity of our young people because they're our greatest wealth, our greatest resource. And it is such a tragedy that we have 20 million children out of school in Nigeria alone. And even greater tragedy is that there's several more millions in school are not learning anything that is relevant to global market, right? And we brag about our population and how, you know, in the next 50 years, we're going to have the youngest population in the world, and all of the young people will be in Nigeria. Europe, you know, is gradually dying out, and everyone will come to Africa, to Nigeria for solutions, for talents, for people. But what we're missing is the world is rapidly evolving, and technology is changing the very fabric of our society. If we have 20 million children that can't even read and write, how will they participate in that economy? So we all must urgently find new entry points for the African child to access global markets and laboratories where solutions are discovered and crafted. And we must do this within the next 50 to 100 years. This must be priority because this is the fundamental building block of any society. We must be intentional about being the talent hub for the world. I'll leave you with this thought. And this was a conversation I had, you know, with Oga Abu recently. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. Right? Now, see, here's the thing. The world demands our raw materials, but it rejects our finished products. It desires our educated workforce, but then it classifies our uneducated workforce as refugees. And this is the real African challenge. This is the Nigerian challenge, that we export less raw materials and we focus instead on developing our people, which is our single greatest product. And this is how we change anything. All of the other things are fancy, they're great, but if you have children that cannot participate in this future that we talk about, then we have a problem. What do you think, Funke?
Remember that I talked about population being an advantage the other time. Yeah. And I've said again, if we have about 104 million Nigerians who are youths, how are we deploying these youth? What is our long-term, mid-term plan for this youthful population? How do we engage them? How do we pass the baton to this population, and what will they begin to do? I remember Bright, one of us here, said consistently at the table here that look at the algorithm of social media in Nigeria. It's always bringing the irrelevant, always bringing skits. We're laughing our lives away. Whereas in other nations, they are bringing out inventors. They're deliberate about what they're feeding their population with on social media. So, Tunde, you're spot on this one. It is this rethinking of our education that will be the solution. In Nigeria today, if you went to the Polytechnic, you're sub to the one who went to the university. And we've continued that culture for years. So we make those who focus on vocational skills, we make them feel that they are less important, less intelligent and less brilliant to the ones who went to the universities to learn theories.
And they are the ones who power the economy.
And these are the people we need to invent. We don't give them that space to see themselves as geniuses who can invent. So they go perfectionally. They just go, let it be that we went. And when you get to the workplace, they're also discriminated there. They're paid lower. So how do we want inventions? How do we want our people, our youth, to be right out there, apart from entertainment? We need the inventions. We need the skills. We need them to take over. It's not just about mouthing too young to run. I'll be too old. What is that one? Too young to run.
Not too young.
Not too young to run. We need these people to be not too young, to be billionaires, to be business people, to start thinking in terms of agriculture, not carrying phones up and down and making skates.
A couple of weeks back, I was talking to AK, and then he was like, Zumah, how can we make Nigeria better? And I'm like, education and agriculture. He was like, break it down for me. I'm like, agriculture, because when there is food insecurity, there is general insecurity. When people can afford to eat, people are driven to anything to get things done. So we need agriculture to have secure stability.
Security, yeah.
You know, and it was like education. I said, because we have a teeming young population.
Yeah.
And if we don't harness them properly and prepare them such that they will be able to compete globally, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to lead to further insecurity in the future. So we have to start preparing them for the future from now. You know, back to your advocacy, the China story shows the impact of focus. China became intentional about developing their workforce in the technical area, and they have achieved it. You know, they are like the go-to place for everybody. Now you need someone to do something, or go to China. Even the little things, it's disturbing. Anyway, I don't want to go back on how Nigeria is. Our curricula is quite outdated. It needs a total overhaul. We need to stop teaching for survival, but for innovation.
For innovation.
A large part of Nigeria's insecurity is a fallout of out-of-school children. We need to aggressively educate our people and not just offer them education just because a lot of education, basic education, is just because education.
Yeah.
But you need to aggressively educate them on quality education that makes them able, that will enable them to compete globally with their peers.
It's important to be intentional. And I wrote that down here. I just said be intentional. And intentional here relates to everybody, okay? As a parent, for instance, we are intentional in how we ensure that we take care of our children, we expose our children to the right kind of information. I mean, for me, as a parent, we are very intentional in making sure that our kids knew how to play chess. Instead of them sending them out for summer school, we send them to a chess school. Go and learn. Other summers, we send them to coding. That's why Tomisi got to learn how to code and some other things. So we're very intentional. And I think that if the government on its own side, and when I say government here, I don't just mean the federal government, because everybody looks at the federal government. I'm talking also about the government at the local level, the state and the local government themselves, who have actually the responsibility and the budget to handle education at the primary and secondary level, are very intentional with some of the things that you have said, which is designing of the curriculum. I'll give you an example in Germany, for instance. So in Germany, you know, they have this system where every kid starts off at the normal level. When it gets to a certain level, at I think I don't know, year 10 or something like that, they do an assessment to determine who goes further and who drops off somewhere else. Now, those who are able to go further, they go into a system called the gymnasium. Okay, those who cannot, they go into technical school. Yeah. So very early on in the life of that child already is given the skills that match their ability. It's not every child that will succeed academically. So we need to be intentional to identify those children very early on. Nigeria
is like a prison that kills dreams. And the reason why I've said this is because if you think Nigeria is not a prison, let's urge US, Canada, United Kingdom, EU, and other development partners, just for 1 week, let's do a social experiment. Let them allow visa free to their country, and let's see how many of us will be left here. You see, why I have said this is very simple. Ours is a country where Geneva, for example, Switzerland, free education free medicals. So many things are just free. So this talent that he's talking about in Germany can actually emerge. You know, aside that, you also see that there is no motivation for patriotism here. Because there's nothing. Why should I be patriotic? The people who are not patriotic are the ones who are getting GCFR, GCON. They are the ones that are recognized by government. Criminality pays here. That is why the bigger the crime, the bigger the respect. Abelu is a typical example. Additionally, patriotism is not forced. Patriotism is engendered. So there's nothing to cultivate patriotism. And that's why you see the decay, you know, and the disloyalty from the citizenry towards the nation and its leaders.
I would like to point out that you shouldn't expect a reward for being patriotic. It is part of your responsibility as a citizen.
All right, anyway, to just wrap up, I think regardless, you know, it is only love and genuine love for our nation that would help us move the needle. And this should come as no surprise to us, but except we value and invest in our prime resource, which is our people, we will remain on our knees.
Well, on our knees and bound up in chains.
God, I beg.
Well. Well, prisoner of conscience. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. Arrests are all the rage at the moment. I'm currently following up on several arrest charges. A recent one being that of Darlington Okoye, aka Speed Darlington, arrested in Lagos last week Friday, taken to Abuja to be detained at the IRT building in Abuja based on a complaint by the famous music artist Burna Boy. Well, you must have come across a man who was arrested in Delta State for bathing in murky waters as a form of protest, and rightly so, against the deplorable state of roads in that state. Arrests are being made left, right, and center. Arrest of protesters, arrest of labor leaders, arrest of journalists, and yet the police are afraid to arrest Yahaya Bello. These arrests are clearly aimed at intimidating Nigerian citizens and stifling freedom of expression, simplicity, in my view. Many refuse to come out and vote, afraid to protest, or even to speak out in any way against the oppressive injustice in the nation because they are afraid of being imprisoned and losing their lives. I have been in prison several times. I too have loved ones and people I care about. So why do people like myself keep on speaking up? It is because long before anyone imprisons me, I'm already a prisoner of conscience as a Nigerian. And this is why I think every Nigerian should enjoy exemption on the day of reckoning in heaven. Because God should have considered that we've suffered enough. I owe it to my children and their children to give an account of the part I played whilst the ship called Nigeria was going down. And this is why we do what we do. Last week, Aisha Yusufu threw out a challenge on this table right here. She said that if those who have been destroying our nation for 64 years haven't given up, then you and I have no business giving up. And I agree absolutely. I throw out a challenge of my own today. If your conscience doesn't provoke you to rise up against injustice, corruption, and oppression, then aren't you already imprisoned, dead, and buried, despite the fact that you're apparently roaming freely on the street? We are in chains because we are dead to our conscience. If Nigerians began to develop some sensitivity to their conscience and act accordingly, it wouldn't take long before we truly experience liberty and prosperity worth celebrating, and it certainly would take another 64 years to achieve this.
Okay, I would like to start by saying this is also part of citizenship advocacy.
Yes, indeed.
Nigerians, generally, we don't like rocking the boat, and we are very comfortable with watching people. That became prevalent in recent times. We're comfortable with seeing wrongdoing and injustice and just letting it go. Are we tired? At what point did we become this empathetic? I like your advocacy, surprisingly, you know. but it's important for us not to be apathetic towards the happenings around us. See something. When you see something, you do something, you say something. That's it for me.
I mean, you talk about being a prisoner of conscience. In reality, you are in prison because you choose to be imprisoned, either by what you see, either by accepting as norm, as fact, what you see.
Identity politics as well.
And you go into that. There is a way that Nigeria can be happening, but that's not your reality, because it's not something that you accept that that's your reality. You can be in the civil service or in an office space, and the system there is corruption.
And you choose not to.
And you choose not to. Okay, so that's the norm, but you choose not to. You can be on the road and everybody is breaking the traffic light and you choose not to. And there are cars behind you, wait, all sorts of things, and you choose not to. You choose not to be a prisoner of the system that you found yourself. And I think that when we have these conversations, and it's so exhausting, about Nigeria and about the fact of how we, by ourselves, by the things we permit, by the things that we do, we are the ones that actually draw us back.
But let me take you on what you said about several arrests here and there. Yes, arrests here and there, because there's a lot of impunity in Nigeria at the moment, both by the ruling class and the average citizen. There is deliberate flouting of the laws. There is crass ignorance. The right that you have to say things about particular issues or developments, it's the same right I have. You have no right to malign people or to defame people. You were not there, you didn't know what happened in the US, and then you went out there and you said those mean things about that person. Forget, and I like the reply, Burna Boy's reply, that, well, it was your mom that made me to calm down. Because the same way your mom, how do you say,
so forth, labored
the
over
way
you.
Your mom labored on you is the same way my mom labored on me. It's the same way I've been in the trenches for years before blowing, as we say in Nigeria. So we need, today is Mental Health Day. We need to consider other people's mental health as well when we make certain statements, or we dabble into some issues, and that is that. But generally, there is impunity and there is ignorance, and people need to know where their right stops and where the rights of others starts. Yeah. We need boundaries.
You should stop abusing power. You go and pay police or write a petition against somebody because the person has defamed. How many times have people defamed me? And people will continue to defame me. So the idea that, because this is somebody that sings against oppressors, acting as an oppressor, using the police to harass people, if you feel defamed, sue the person. Because even the so-called criminal defamation that is relying on, the courts, even the Supreme Court has said that the remedies for defamation is personal, it's a civil wrong. So the advocacy that we always make is that we are not supporting people who defame people, and neither do we encourage defamation of any kind. But the advocacy is that crime, the ingredients and elements of crime, must be what is the business of the state in Speed Darlington and Burna Boy argument when no crime has occurred. That is the advocacy and nothing more.
But to add to the conversation, I just got back from New York yesterday, and on my final day just seeing the city, I was looking at the skyscrapers. I was like, wow. I don't think there's any other city in the world that has that many skyliners. And
New York.
And it was like, how can a building be this tall? And, we trusted enough to just walk and go to the very top floor and still be at ease. And it's because they've built a society on trust, that you trust that people are competent across all levels, all systems. And I think that is what is missing in our country. We live in a very low trust society. And because of that, there's now a culture of NERS that has permeated because we don't trust the other person to do the right thing. Like, oh, this person is cutting corners. Well, let me protect my own interests too. And that has really, really harmed us as a country. And the second thing is empathy, you know, and this is why I think like the work that I do, like beyond the chess and all of the cognitive benefits of it to the children I work with, I think it's to be able to bridge that gap of empathy between the haves and the have-nots, just like, you know, Yinka said earlier. And I'll say this, when we were much younger, right, and the schools we attended, you could literally be in the same classroom with a governor's son.
That's right.
Right. But now, that will never happen again. And this is what our society has become, and that is the gap, and therein lies the problem. That if the rich ones, if our leaders, if the elites have no empathy for the poor, then we'll never have a society that truly works. There will be no empathy, there will be no trust. And this is why I challenge everyone, that ask yourself, what mountain am I climbing? And I think one thing we have in common here is that we all love Nigeria. Whether did you like to admit it or not, I think of all the people here, it's the one that loves Nigeria the most. But we need to find meaningful ways to express that love within our own sphere of influence. What do I have in my hands? What can I do? We can continue to hold the government accountable. That should never stop. But in our capacity as well, let us take responsibility within our sphere of influence and change something wherever we can.
Can we clap?
Well said indeed. Well, fear usually speaks to self-preservation, whereas courage looks outward to the preservation of others, being our brother's keepers. It begins with us at the table, same time, same channel, taking on the issues that matter. Till then, it's goodbye from all of us.
Bye.
Bye.